Good afternoon, everybody. This is Brian Ankney with AutoSuccess magazine. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join us today for another great AutoSuccess webinar. Today we're going to talk about lost service marketing, and my guest is Jim Green, Director of Operations at Team Velocity. But before we get started, I would like to share a couple things with you. One, we're going to hold all the questions until the end of the webinar. And depending on what device you're on, if you're on a tablet or a PC or a laptop, you probably have a pane on the right side of your screen for a GoToWebinar, and near the bottom it says questions. If you hit that plus sign next to questions, it'll open up a place for you to type in your questions. Please type them in as we go. It'll just save them for the end, and then we'll address all the questions at the end. If you're using an Android or an Apple, you probably have some form of a frame that goes around the screen, and somewhere on that frame, every device is a little different. You'll see a question mark. By just clicking that question mark, it opens up the area to type in a question. And I've had a couple people comment to me, how do I get back? Well, there's also a little screen. It looks like a monitor that might be sitting on your desk. By clicking that, it'll take you back to the webinar. It is a little confusing because none of the buttons have words on them. So that's how you'll ask your questions. I'll save all of those till the end. One more thing before we get started. If you haven't yet, please join AutoSuccess Webinars. It's a group on Facebook. Go to the search bar on Facebook. It's at the top of the screen. Type in AutoSuccess Webinars. It'll bring up the group. Request to join. Now, once you're a member of that group, you'll have the ability to interact with our speakers and also AutoSuccess staff. And you're welcome to suggest topics or speakers or anything you'd like to see us do. In addition to that, probably the greatest benefit is your ability to interact with the other attendees. You know, you're going to learn lots of things on all of these webinars, and none of them are things you can accomplish with a single click or even a single day, and most of them not even within a single set of months. So as you're implementing the changes, so are other people. So please feel free to share your successes and your failures with each other and learn from each other's experiences as you all implement these positive changes in your dealership. With that being said, it is my great pleasure to introduce Jim Green from Team Velocity. Jim, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Brian, and welcome everybody to this afternoon's Lost Service Marketing webinar. I think we're going to have a little bit of fun today. At least we'll gain a little more insight into really what's working out in the marketplace for dealers that are really trying to capture some of those high mileage, high margin ROs that over the years have really been captured by third-party and independent repair facilities across the country. So as we move forward through the presentation today, just a second here, we've got some, oh, there we go. As we move through the presentation today, really quickly, we've done our introduction. Just going to move through the industry and talk a little about what's happening today and what we're seeing as a whole, really show you what the opportunity, and then really dive into a marketing plan that really any dealership in today's marketplace could take advantage of. Go through the market, where you should be talking to people, the people within that market as well, what's motivating those consumers today, the message that you should be taking to those consumers based upon some really good data that will support the offers that you put into the marketplace. Of course, the mediums that you should be utilizing in order to reach these consumers today. And then the measurement is really, at the end of the day, how well this program is performing in your particular dealership. I'm actually going to take you through a short case study with one of our clients and just what the advantages of putting a dedicated lost service marketing program in place can be from not just a financial reward from the dealership, but from a sustaining period over time as well. So with that said, just kind of take us through and look at what some of the challenges are in service marketing. And this isn't necessarily from an industry standpoint, from competition. I understand we got a little bit of a lag here. Oh.
Yeah, it usually drags behind about a second or two.
Okay. I apologize for this, folks. You should, Brian, can you just confirm that you can see the introduction screen, the 5 silos?
Yes, actually I can see it on both my laptop and I have another device running as an attendee. So yes, absolutely, we are on point.
Perfect. Well, these 5, really the 5 things that, there's a lot of challenges in service marketing and marketing in general in automotive space, but typically what we see is that most of the profit centers within a dealership, new, pre-owned, finance, parts, service, all typically work independent of one another and don't have a synergistic approach to their marketing. So that's a real challenge for service departments. Another thing is that it's really not consistent with other forms of marketing they might not be doing, especially when it comes to what the OEM is doing on their behalf. The other challenge is dedicating resources to really go after high dollar ROs versus customer frequency. A lot of dealers have a tendency to focus on those customers they can get in sooner, which are kind of oil change only type of ROs, versus the consumers with higher mileage on their car that can have a higher dollar RO. Big one that we see, and I just came back from 2 weeks being on the road with at a Chrysler conference with about 1,000 of their dealers, and one of the biggest things that we talked about was the lack of dedicated marketing budget for the service department, even though it is the most profitable service profit center a dealership has. So that's a real big one and a big concern that's out there, but one that can be easily addressed when you see the results you can put in. And then there's just the lack of experience, typically what we see from individuals that are actually running service departments. Typically they came up through the service department as a service writer, even a tech, and through management, and just don't have the understanding necessarily in today's marketplace what will really connect with their customers. So a few challenges are over there, but a lot of these, and certainly we're going to talk about how to overcome these today. But a couple of factors happening in our industry. It's about a $500 billion business, or getting close to probably this year as well. The interesting thing is that just a few years ago, it was about $350 billion. And I'm going to explain why that number continues to grow at the rate that it does. But the main thing we're here to talk about today is the lack of dealers' business in capturing this, capturing their quality share of these dollars. 3 years ago, dealers were getting about 27% of this business, and at the end of 2015, they're getting about 20% of this business. So it's on the decline, it's not on the rise, even though many of you are saying, yeah, but I'm really, really busy in my service department, and I don't have enough room to take any more of our customers in, or we're at capacity. We're still continuing to decline in this field. And a couple of things that we've got to be aware of in the marketplace. We've already, I'm sure you all aware that just recently we have found out that we're probably not going to hit the goal that we thought from a new car sales perspective at the beginning of the year. We've actually probably plateaued and actually will taper back a little bit for the next couple of years. But for the segment that we're talking about, we're going to continue to see a rise in service business and service sales, and it's pretty consistent for the next 5 years at right about 3% increase. Now, 3% increase doesn't sound like a tremendous amount, but when you consider that's almost $15 billion, there's lots of opportunities for dealers to go capture some of this growing segment of the business. Reason why is because the fleet of cars out in America right now is just getting older. Basically, right now, it's about 11 and a half years old. 11 and a half years is the average age of the vehicle on the road, with nearly 2/3 of those vehicles between 5 and 11 years old. So we have about 60% of the market that are really the sweet spot for where dealers should be going after for these high mileage, high margin ROs. It's really a good time for a dealer to start thinking about putting a plan in place, especially when you consider that people are keeping their cars longer. If you'll look at the bottom of that graph, just about 10 years ago, people would keep their new cars about 4.5 years. Well, they're keeping them now almost 6.5 years, which really means that from a sales perspective, we are taking a customer out of the market for nearly 6 years. So we're probably going to see a huge shift in focus to customer. Well, we see a lot of customer retention right now, but you're going to see even more so in the coming years, just because people are going to continue to keep their cars longer and not shorter. And here's some fun additional facts that are out there in the marketplace that really support why a dealer today should be going after these customers. This is sourced through Google, who just released a study, and basically what they found was that 73% of the people who have a favorable service visit at any facility are likely to go back there to that same provider. So really what that tells us is that if you can capture these people and get them back into your dealership, or get them in the dealership for the first time, and you do a good job for them, they're more than likely going to come back for their next repair visit. Here's an interesting fact as well. About 62% of the people will travel a ways, about 5 miles for routine maintenance, which really tells us they're just shopping for the best price for some of that routine maintenance. I like to use this because very few people are working on their cars right now. It's really almost every fish in the pond is worth going after, so to speak, because very few people are out there doing it themselves. And we know that service is continuing to grow because from a search perspective, where service-related searches are growing at a rate 8% faster than sales-related searches, according to Google. So just some information that you should consider is that, and I think the top one is the key. If you can get people back into your dealership and you do a good job, they're going to continue to come back to your dealership. And really what we're seeing in the marketplace and where the opportunity lies is, a person buys a car, we tend to spend a lot of time and money, both at the dealership level and from the manufacturer's perspective, in communicating with these customers. We have a lot of contact. That's the reason why customers come back very frequently for the first couple of years of servicing. A lot of it has to do with maintenance plans that are in place right now, but where we really see customers drop off is when the manufacturer's warranty has a tendency to expire. Conversely, we also know that the longer you keep your car and the more miles you put on it, the more likely it is to break down, and that's when we see those high dollar ROs. But we also have to address the fact that in almost every dealership that we look at and that we analyze, the loyalty rates just continue to decrease over time, especially when we get into those high dollar ROs. And that's really what the opportunity is about today, and where dealers should be focusing a dedicated lost service program. Because when you take a look at that simple graph that we're all very familiar with in this industry, we've seen this for years, we know this for years. I just told a couple of our dealers when we analyze their service business, it's almost a mirror image. This is an actual case study that we're going to go through now and take a look at, where we can see that this dealer is writing a very high percentage of their business with vehicles that are under 50,000 miles. Also have a very low average RO, and when you look at that compared to their overall business, when you can start writing ROs that are three times more valuable by focusing on vehicles really in the later ages of the vehicle, this is what a lost service program is really designed to do. So what we like to do is show dealers this information, show them what the opportunity is. There's no mystery that dealers know that they're losing this business. It's just how to capture it, and it really starts with analyzing and plotting what you're doing right now, setting benchmarks, and then putting a program in place that we're going to share that actually will take you and get you into the homes and communicating with those customers that can produce much higher valued ROs. So the first thing we need to do with a good plan is to identify the market and the area that which you need to go after and who you need to go after. Now, this will change by brand when you talk about lost customers and the frequency of which you need to get them back into the dealership. For example, a lost customer may be a different time for a Mercedes franchise than for a Nissan dealer. Nissan dealers need to see a customer 2 times a year, and in order to do that, they might consider that if a customer hasn't been back within 6 months, that's their parameter for lost. Whereas a Mercedes-Benz doesn't need, with their mileage and their maintenance schedules, doesn't really need to see them but every 10,000 miles. They might not need to see them for 12 months. But really what we're talking about here are people that haven't been back for 12 to 18 months, that purchased from your dealership or had a business transaction with your dealership, so they know you, but they just haven't been back for a while. And then, of course, in order to grow your business, you have to get focused on those customers who live in and around your dealership, drive your brand, but have never been into your dealership for some reason. So the first thing we want to know is the people we want to go after, and then we need to look to find an area where we can best spend our budget, because it's really important. And one of the things I spent a lot of time talking this week with a lot of these service managers from Chrysler dealerships was they don't have a lot of money, so you really have to make the money work in their department in order for them to see results and really continue to spend the money. So you have to define the market. And the first thing you should start looking at is the distance from your dealership. You can't go out as far as you generally can for sales to bring service customers in, because they just won't drive as far to come back for services at your dealership. And you also have to take into consideration kind of the geographic area, traffic patterns, and other convenience factors that are in and around your dealership. So the first thing you should be doing is taking a list of the zip codes and kind of plotting where you're actually having success right now from a servicing perspective. We typically say to dealers that you really want to take a look at those zip codes that in a combination do at least 70% of your service business. You also want to make sure that when you're looking at these, you plot these and find out exactly where those customers are, but you also need to make sure that you take a look at what your competition is doing in and around you. It's not just that your dealership has other dealers you compete against. It also is the fact that you've got a lot of third-party independents, and that's really, it's no secret that the Jiffy Lubes of the world, the Tires Plus, the Walmarts and whatnot will set up near dealerships or dealership rows because they know that that's a great place for customers, and they have some advantages that they think they have and the customers perceive when it comes to marketing to those customers. But the first thing you need to do is take a look at what the market you need to go into. And then you also need to make sure you go areas where you're not so good. A lot of times dealers will say, well, I want to go into that marketplace because I look at data and it shows me, for example, I'm a Honda owner, I'm a Honda dealer, and it's not too far away from my dealership, and there's 1,500 Honda owners in that particular zip code. But when you really break it down and look at it and figure out where you've been doing your business, if it doesn't start to make sense because you're not doing much business there right now, there's probably a reason for that, and that reason could be taking into consideration factors like a bridge, a road, just the accessibility for that particular area. So the data will tell you when you start to analyze it, really the market that you should be going after and defining that. And as we talked about, with customers who have been in your dealership before that are lost, you already have a bit of a relationship with them, you might be able to go out a little further, but for those conquest customers who live near you, you might want to dial it back and take a look and just say, we probably want to tighten the circumference around the dealership a little bit with conquest customers, because typically a conquest customer will not drive a long way to try out a new service or facility in the automotive space. The other thing you really need to consider is who really lives in your market, and do they still live in the market? If you're working with some good data partners and data vendors in your dealership, they should be able to tell you if someone still lives in the marketplace, because as I said, these service dollars need to be really laser focused on who they're talking to. And if you're talking to someone who potentially has moved out of your area, you're just wasting your money. So when you consider that 75% of the population moves every 5 years, but on an annual basis it's about 15%, make sure that those people who you think you're going to be talking to still live there. Conversely, you also need to make sure that people who move into the marketplace, you have a good, clean list of those consumers as well, in order for you to be able to contact them and introduce them to your dealership for potential business. But most importantly, when you start talking about your customers, you want to make sure that you're really filtering down to find your very best service prospects. So hopefully, with some data cleansing, probably some other filters that you can put in place. Model year, for example, is a very important one to look at. Make sure you're not going after vehicles that might have obsolete parts that you can't get. That was brought up to me time and time again over the last couple of weeks in talking with dealerships on some of the customers they don't want to talk to. Also, from a mileage perspective, some dealers don't want to go after too high a mile customers. I don't know if that's necessarily a good strategy, but it would all be dependent upon your scenario and your dealership as well, because not every customer makes sense to market to. So when you break it down, you really need to focus on a great area and the people within that market. And then you really need to understand, from a messaging standpoint, what's motivating customers today. And the fact of the matter is, this isn't a need this isn't a desire or a want. It's an actual need for every one of us and everybody out there who owns a car. We have to maintain our car, but there are certain things that consumers are looking for right now when they're choosing a service provider. Primarily, they're looking for someone who's trustworthy and convenient. It's not necessarily the top one, but reputation and convenience are very important for people today. The main one is, where can I get that for a good price? The number one motivator right now to drive customers back into a dealership for service, consistently in every survey that we've seen, is I want a fair and good price. It doesn't necessarily have to be a cheapest price. It just has to be a fair price and consistent price. They also say that when I get there, I want to make sure I can get some other things done, kind of a one-stop shop. So we need to make sure that we are promoting ourselves in a way that lets consumers know that we're just not a quick lane. Obviously, they know that we can get a lot of stuff done at the dealership, but they want to make sure that if I have to have something done, I can get it done right there, plus a few other convenience items. And that's what the independents have done very well. Believe it or not, they have put this, I would call it a perception in the customer's eyes, that they're more convenient, obviously less expensive, faster service, and they offer a lot of locations that from a convenience factor for clients or for consumers out there. But the real thing that we need to look at is why independents are taking our business when we start to talk of going to combat them is really how do we overcome the perceptions in the marketplace when it comes to why independents are better than going to a franchise car dealer. Now, we on this call all know they're probably not, but are you exploiting that in your marketing, and are you talking about that to your consumers? So if we know that, then comes the message. What should the message be? Well, we believe, first and foremost, what drives consumers back are going to be very good, transparent offers. So we look at data all the time. We look at response rates, and what we know to be true is that there are certain offers that you should include in your advertising that will drive customers back. And these are the ones that we see: brakes, fluids, tires, and believe it or not, ignition systems are things that people will bring the customers back to your dealership. So you should have blends of this. Things that you want to stay away from are items that are done, timing belts. I see a lot of service pieces going out from dealership with timing belts. It's very difficult to get someone excited about coming back into the dealership for a timing belt. So really what you need to do is start talking to them about those offers that get customers back into the dealership. Most importantly, what we've been successful with and dealers are starting to gain ground with is how you can beat the independents by playing in their game. Because service is their only business, and because they are just this faster service with no appointment necessary with the less expensive message, we believe you should be taking your advantages exactly to the marketplace with what you can do and what sets you apart. First and foremost is we have things that they don't. It's called OEM and ASE certified technicians in our dealership. I'm sure all of you, if you talk to you looked in, those of you that are service managers on here, you know exactly how much money you spent over the last 24 months on not just training for your technicians and updating them with the latest and the greatest and providing them with those tools, but also the computer systems that are needed, updating that software, the equipment that's needed. It's literally in the hundreds of thousands of dollars every few years to make sure that your shop is staying abreast of what's needed to work on the cars today. With most cars now having between 30 to 50 computers on them, there's very little chance these independents, and in a lot of cases they don't, have the right equipment to diagnose what's really wrong with the car. But they also don't provide some of the convenience factors that people are looking for that you have a huge advantage. And most importantly, as we tell all of our clients, and you are aware of this, most of the people that are working in this, probably I wouldn't let mow my lawn. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just they're not certified. They don't have a tremendous amount of training, but yet they're working on a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 investment that we made in the vehicle, all under the ruse that it's more convenient and less expensive, which drives us to how you should define and promote your unique qualifications. You can do this through a variety of mediums, but the key here is to actually go out and find why you're different from your competitors and promote that through your messaging. So it's not just offers that are being placed, but it's really what sets you apart. So think about those and promote those. People actually do look at this and will pay attention to this. And then when it comes to pricing, we in our business know that they are not less expensive than we are. We all know that we can compete with them at a fairly aggressive pricing level. So there's no shame in going out and promoting who you are competing against in the marketplace and showing your actual prices and what you can do for customers versus what they're charging that's easily found online. You can go to anybody's website, Jiffy Lube, Firestone. They'll tell you exactly what their pricing is. Price yours accordingly. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, I don't want to do a $24.95 oil change. I'm going to get a bunch of people who come into my dealership that just get a cheap oil change. I'll never see them again. Well, the fact of the matter is that just the data doesn't, and the reporting just doesn't meet with that. It is actually the opposite. You will find that, as we have seen and you saw earlier with our customers, these people will get drawn in on those specials that will draw them in, but they'll also end up spending more when they get to the dealership. You need to make sure that you define and promote your offers by audience as well. We have been doing this a lot over the last 10 years in our business, but putting relevant offers in front of consumers based upon their servicing cycle. So, for example, we've got a lost customer here that we can define. These are people that haven't been back for a while but did business with us. Let's give them a moderately priced incentive to come in. Those customers who have defected or conquest haven't been with us or never been with us, we probably need to get real aggressive with those customers. Again, you see very low pricing on here. The fear is that you're going to, you're going to lose money on these. The reality is that you're not. And remember this: even if they come in on that $19.95 oil change the first time, if they have a great experience, about 3/4 of the time they're more than likely to come back for their next service, which might be a much higher RO, and probably in most cases will be. So once you know the market, the people, the motivations, and how we need to go after getting that business back, the offers that we need to put in place, and defining our differences and our unique qualifications, now how do we go out and reach these people? Well, a service campaign needs to look a lot like a sales campaign at the front of the house does, and where they spend their money on a monthly basis. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to be involved in all of these, but you certainly cannot rely on one or two only. If you want to go out and capture this business, you need to dedicate time and resources to figuring out what works best for you. It can be a combination of mail, online display, paid search, email, a social presence, clearly having somebody or individuals at the dealership who have been trained to handle the incoming phone calls to get those people in. And of course, in today's marketplace, you need to have a very good mobile presence. If you don't have a good mobile presence with your service marketing, you're going to lose a tremendous amount of business, because we all play on our mobile devices right now, and most of the people searching are searching with a mobile device. And to us, that means, and really, that once you put this plan in place and define the mediums that you're going to use, have consistency across all those mediums. Make sure that your email blasts that go out look like the online display that you're promoting, looks like the mail that you might be sending the consumer. Make sure that any paid search that you're doing has the same information when a customer searches, so your keywords and phrases that you're using match what you're displaying. And most importantly, and I can't stress this enough, if you spend the money to put this out in the marketplace, you need to make sure that your consumers have a place to go where they can find this information easily. Transparency in the service world is almost more important than it is in the sales world. And that's because people want to know very quickly what it will cost me to get the work done for the basic services, the maintenance items that I need to have done. So make sure when your website, wherever you're driving that consumer and that traffic, is updated with everything else that you've been sending. So many times I have seen dealers that send out a piece of mail to a consumer with one pricing. They land on the dealer's website and it's completely different, or unfortunately non-existent. Customers are looking for this information. They'll make decisions, but they want to be able to get this information quickly in a transparent manner to know that they're getting their perceived good deal. Along those lines as well, make it easy for your consumers to be able to engage with you. Put your information up there front and center, so whatever drove them to your website or when they called, your people know about it and people can see it. There's a lot of tools out there right now that help with service scheduling, but a lot of them are almost anti-service scheduling when it comes to pricing, it comes to transparency. I recently went on to try a few service scheduling, actually went and tried to get my car at a local dealership service, and I went through the drill with them, And as I continued to put in my information, told them my car, my model, my year, my miles, the first services that came up that they said I would recommend was almost a $400 service. And when I broke down that $400 service, it was nothing more than a basic oil change, some inspection, and a tire rotation. In this market where I live, you can get a tire rotation and an oil change coupon from a lot of the third-party independents for about anywhere from $29.95 to get you in there to $19.95. So this dealership is making me go through a process, and it's not competitively priced. This is what I was talking about before. If you're driving consumers through a good crafted campaign and offers, make sure when they get to your dealership they can find it easily. And then fortunately for this dealer, when I actually drill down to see what their oil change prices, they're nowhere near the marketplace. Now, I'm not saying that any use of these tools is good, bad, or indifferent. Just take it into consideration from the consumer standpoint. If I'm looking for transparency, I want a good price, I want to be able to find it fast, and you drive me to some place with information, just make sure I can get it and make sure I know what it is. So lastly, as we go through, we'll talk a little bit about measurement. And measurement today in the marketplace is pretty good for the most part. If you're working with a good vendor, they've got ways to tell you and tools you can utilize to ensure that the program is actually working. First and foremost, it's if we're going out and we've identified certain individual households that we're talking to, did any of those people come back to our dealership and did they match up? That's a pretty good way of looking at it, and taking a look at all the ROs that business brought in, balancing that out compared to how much we spent, and we can figure out a good return on investment. So one thing I'd like to do is just kind of share with you a case study that we put together on a dealer of ours that's been a client since March of 2013. And up until June of this year, this is 2016 numbers here, from a customer pay perspective, they were actually doing pretty good. They had no dedicated service marketing program other than a few variable offers they would include in some of their advertising that were just kind of basic oil change offers. In May, they came to us and said, we'd like to implement this lost service program. We need to go out and capture. They basically followed the plan by identifying the market they wanted to go after, the individual households that were there, and put together dedicated resources. And you can see what happened in June when they started on the program. In the first 3 months of the program, they had a tremendous amount of increase, basically an average of about 600 ROs per month. Now, not all of those were solely on lost service and conquest customers, but the big majority of them will, which we'll get into in a second. But most importantly, and one of the things from a measurement standpoint that every one of you should be looking at is not just the increase in ROs that a service marketing program, just on a month-over-month basis will do for you, but dive down into how many active customers, how many customers are we reactivating back into our system. Because this dealer was not doing a bad job prior to this program being installed. Every month they were basically reconnecting with or re-engaging with about 350 customers on a monthly basis, meaning these customers were either lost or conquest customers, so they were doing a pretty good job of it. But look what happened in June when they implemented the new program. The first month out, a pretty good increase. Look what has happened since through July, August, and now September numbers. They have more than doubled the amount of consumers that they have reactivated into their dealership. And keep this in mind, again, 73% of the customers will come back once they've re-engaged with the business, the service center, if they have a good service. And these guys do a tremendous job of doing it. And that's where a good service marketing program can come into play. And people ask, well, is the juice worth the squeeze? How are we doing it? Is if we invest this money, what kind of return can we expect? Well, as we know up top, the average increase is about 605 in monthly RO count, customer pay RO count. 55% of those, though, came from the lost and conquest segment that we talked about. So roughly 332 consumers re-engaged with that dealership on an average month. Their average RO spend, if you can take a look here with measurement, was $377 per RO. Not too bad for this dealership, which means if you take the 332 customers times the average RO of $377, you can see that monthly this is generating what we call plus new business of $125,000 That's not too bad for a dealership that invested a little under $10,000 a month in a targeted loss service marketing program. So I hope you found some of this information helpful. I would like to open it up into any questions. I think, Brian, have you got any questions? I can't see any on the control side.
Yeah, actually, I've got a couple here. What media works best for conquest?
That's really good. That's a great question. We see two significant jumps with conquest customers on the servicing side with mail and digital. Digital is one of the most underserved mediums from a servicing perspective. Most dealers' digital budget from a paid search, and I'm talking paid search here, but most of it goes to the front of the house. I did not talk to one service manager who had really dedicated any resources to paid search over the last couple of weeks, which I found extremely surprising. However, when we do, almost every one of our dealers has some component of paid search and the service dedicated to the service department, and that's where we see a tremendous amount of response. And mail, of course, is very good. Mail is very good because it's a one-to-one communication with customized offers and relevant offers to consumers that you know live in your market and you know who are driving your car.
Okay. This next question is, most dealers do not attempt to compete pricing-wise against most independents, as we know high-volume services that independents are capturing from transmissions to engines. Why not consider having a tiered pricing for a reliable non-OEM part to the OEM with guarantees?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think he's saying why not consider having tiered pricing for a reliable non-OEM part to compare against the OEM part, like in a franchise dealer?
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe I'm missing something in the translation of the question. Is this a parts question or is this a service question?
You know what? Here, Michael, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you real quick so you can clarify this. Let me just find you real quick. Michael, there you are. Michael, we can hear you now. If you want to go ahead and ask that question, go ahead and ask it. Michael? Oh, may not have Michael right now. Oh, he's self-muted. Okay. Well,
okay.
We'll come back to that one. We've got more.
Yeah.
Actually, this is a simple one. Where do you get started?
Before you spend $1, do exactly the steps that we talked about. You know who you need to go after. That's loss and conquest customers. So that's kind of a given with the loss service marketing program. Define your market before you go spend $1. Go out, work with a vendor. If you've got a good partner, analyze your transactional data from a servicing perspective. Figure out where you have been doing the majority of your service business. And the reason you should be doing this is because your past service revenue history and transaction history is a really good indicator of where you're going to be doing your future business. And you will be surprised that when you analyze that, and although it might make up 70 to 80% of your overall business, you're going to find that within those 15 to 20, 25 zip codes maybe, you're going to find that you're probably only doing about 10% of the service work of all of the same brand owners that you could possibly do business with within those zip codes. Basically, you don't have to go too far, but you do need to define it. As I said, just because a zip code might be near you and just because it looks target rich, because you might be able to get some household counts with same brand owners, doesn't necessarily need to go after those owners. So that's where you really got to get with a good vendor and a good partner that says, look, at these customers, this is a good area here, but this one is not so good over here. So that's really how you get started. And then it becomes down to choosing, you kind of know what your messaging needs to be at this point, we would hope. So then it's choosing the resources that work best within your dealership. If you don't have good phone, and if you don't feel that in your dealership, for example, you don't have some of your service writers don't have great phone skills right now, I don't know that I would do a lot of targeted search because most of those lead to phone calls. We see a tremendous amount of phone calls generated, and that's a good thing. But and conversely, if you do a lot of if you don't think you have a very good BDC or people that are working on an email side, you might not want to engage with email at this point in time. So you just kind of got to look at be very be upfront with yourself and say what are our strengths with our people. And that will kind of determine the mediums you need to go through.
All right. Here's another question. How much should be spent per customer to capture a new one?
How much should be spent per customer to capture a new one? Well, most dealers, in the front of the house is a pretty easy. We look at a cost per sold or a PRU average from an advertising standpoint. Service is a little different animal. You have to kind of first take a look at, and this is why I say the first thing you should do is benchmark. So let's just it's pretty easy to figure out. If you are, if your average RO for a high mileage car in your dealership, as I showed you, when you look at that information, that's why it's so good to work with someone who can actually analyze your data for you and plot it out for you. So if your average RO for those customers right now is 3 times your normal RO, in this case, the example we used was 100 and then 100 for the vehicles under 50,000 and 300 for those over 50,000. You've got to say, okay, how many of those do I want to go out and capture? So you kind of got to look at your capacity. Start with a game plan of how much more do we want to go after and how much more do we want to get. So if your capacity is another 200 ROs a month or 300 ROs a month, 10 a day, 15 a day that you can do, just start putting the math together, figure out what your target's going to be, and then back yourself into a budget. So for example, if you have the capacity to do another $30,000 worth of service revenue because you can do 100 more ROs at 300 a pop, a good return from a service marketing plan is anywhere from 4 to 7 to 1. So just back that out and say 7 to 1 return on your investment, and you should probably be dedicating about $4,000 to that, $4,500 to that goal.
All right. What percentage of your total customer base is good to bring back in the first 6 months?
What percentage of your total customer base is good to bring back? So a little clarification on that. So probably not your total customer base, because you've got to remember you've got active customers that you've already got that are already in the dealership, which is typically about 30% of well, excuse me, that's not, let me throw that number away. You should typically, about 20% of your customers are going to be lost that are in your database right now. If you start looking at when you break down who they are. So, yeah, the key is just keeping the customers active. So if the case is to get the customer back in the dealership, you should probably go after, when you break the data down, you look at it, you're probably going to have plenty of budget to go after all your lost customers in your database starting day one. There's very few dealers when we analyze their data that don't have the opportunity to go after all those customers for day one. We typically see for a normal dealership, if you've got 20,000, total people that you should be talking to in your market, and that includes active customers, lost customers, and then conquest customers, you're probably talking about anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 customers out of that number as an example. So I would say once you've identified those customers that are lost, and you would want to go after all of those in your database. Now, the amount of conquest customers is kind of the variable there. But keep in mind, you have a much better chance of bringing a conquest customer back, a lost customer back because they're familiar with you than you are a conquest customer. So don't make the mistake of saying, hey, we've got 3,000 lost customers. I don't want to go after all of them to start with. I'll go after 1,500 and then go after 4,000 conquest customers. No, go after all 3,000 lost customers first and then take a portion of budget and start going after conquest customers.
All right. Actually, I've got a little clarification here on our question from earlier. It says, early in the webinar delivery, you conveyed the disconnect between departments. Sales handoff to service from both new and pre-owned departments to service advisor assignment with follow-up. This process integration facilitating YOY President's Awards. OEM parts, especially engines and transmissions, are not competitive to the brands that most independents are utilizing. So why not offer pricing starting on non-OEM transmission and engine parts to facilitate more market capture from the independents, then tier up to the OEM offer with their guaranteed comparison?
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. I think that's a great idea. I mean, if you're in a dealership, sounds like you're in a specific dealership that's got some, I wouldn't say necessarily unique opportunities, but that makes complete sense.
All right. All right. Well, it looks like that's our last question for today. Jim, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to share all this information with all of our attendees.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I hit mute with my face. I apologize, everybody. This is Brian Ankney. I'd like to thank Jim for taking the time to share with us today, and I'd like to thank all of you attendees for taking the time to join us. I hope you learned a lot. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Jim or myself. You'll all get an email from me after, you get one tomorrow thanking you for coming. Please reply, and I can get all your questions to Jim. I would like to invite you all to come back to future AutoSuccess webinars as well. Jim, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience before we end today?
I'd just like to say thank you very much, and please, if you have any more questions, I'd be more than happy to take a stab at answering them for you, and or any ideas or things that maybe you'd like to share that work in your dealership with me. I'd love to hear about them. Other than that, then have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.